Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Chapter 9 The Midnight Duel. Harry had never believed he would meet a boy he hated more than Dudley, but that was before he met Draco Malfoy. Still, first year Gryffindors only had potions with the Slytherins, so they didn't have to put up with Malfoy much. Or at least they didn't until they spotted a notice pinned up in the Gryffindor common room that made them all groan. Flying lessons would be starting on Thursday, and Gryffindor and Slytherin would be learning together. Typical, said Harry jerkily. Just what I always wanted, to make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy. He had been looking forward to learning to fly more than anything else. You don't know that you'll make a fool of yourself, said Ron reasonably. Anyway, I know Malfoy is always going on about how good he is at Quidditch, but I bet that's old talk. Malfoy certainly did talk about flying a lot. He complained loudly about first years never getting on the house Quidditch teams, and told long boastful stories that always seemed to end with him narrowly escaping muggles in helicopters. He wasn't the only one, though. The way Seamus Finnegan told it, he spent most of his childhood zooming around the countryside on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who'd listen about the time he'd almost hit a hang glider on Charlie's old broom. Everyone from wizarding families talked about Quidditch constantly. Ron had already had a big argument with Dean Thomas, who shared their dormitory, about soccer. Ron couldn't see what was excited about a game with only one ball, where no one's allowed to fly. Harry had caught Ron prodding Dean's poster of West Ham soccer team, trying to make the players move. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life because his grandmother had never let him near one. Privately, Harry felt she'd had a good reason because Neville managed to have an extraordinary number of accidents, even with both feet on the ground. Hermione Granger was almost as nervous about flying as Neville was. This was something you couldn't learn by heart out of a book. Not that she hadn't tried. At breakfast on Thursday, she bored them all stupid with flying tips she'd gotten out of a library book called Quidditch Through the Ages. Neville was hanging on to his broomstick later, but everybody else was very pleased when Hermione lectured and interrupted by the arrival of the mail. Harry hadn't had a single letter since Hagrid's note. Sometimes then Malfoy had been quick to notice, of course. Malfoy's eagle owl was always bringing him packages of sweets from home, which he opened gloating at the Slytherin table. A burnt owl bought Neville a small package of his grandmother's. He opened it excitedly and showed them a glass bowl the size of a large marble, which seemed to be full with white smokes. "It's Remembrall," he explained. "Gran knows I forget things. This tells you if something you've got forgotten to do. Look, you hold it tight like this, and it turns red. Oh!" His face fell because the Remembrall had suddenly glowed scarlet. "You've forgotten something." Neville was trying to remember what he had forgotten when Draco Malfoy, who was passing the Gryffindor table, snatched a Remembrall out of his hand. Harry and Ron jumped to their feet. They were hopping for a reason to find Malfoy, but Professor McGonagall, who could spot trouble quicker than any teachers in the school, was there in a flash. "What's going on?" "Malfoy's got my remember," Professor scowling. Malfoy quickly dropped the remember back on the tables. "Just looking," he said, and he slipped away with Crabbe and Goyle behind him. At 3:30 that afternoon, Harry, Ron, and other Gryffindors hurried down the front steps onto the ground for their first flying lesson. It was a clear, breezy day, and the grass dripped under their feet as they marched down the sloping lawn toward a smooth, flat lawn on the opposite side of the ground to Forbidden Forest. The trees were swaying darkly in the distance. The Slytherins were already there, and saw their 20 broomsticks lying in neat lines on the ground. Harry had heard Fred and George Weasley complain about the school brooms, saying that some of them started to vibrate if you flew too high or always flew slightly to the left. Their teachers, Madame Hooch, arrived. She had short gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. "Well, what are you all waiting for?" she barked. "Everyone stand by their broomsticks. Come on, hurry up." Harry glanced down at his broom. It was old, and some of the twigs stuck out at all angles. "Stick out your right hand over the broom," called Madame Hooch at the front, "and say up, up," everyone shouted. Harry's broom jumped into his hand at once, but it was one of the few that did. Hermione Granger had simply rolled over on the ground, and Neville hadn't moved at all. Perhaps brooms, like horses, could tell when you were afraid, though. "Harry," there was a quiver in Neville's voice that said only too clearly that he wanted to keep his feet on the ground. Madame Hooch then showed them how to mount their brooms without sliding off the end, and walked up and down the rows correcting their grips. Harry and Ron were delighted that when she told Malfoy he'd been doing it wrong for years. "Now, when I blew my whistle, you kick off from the ground, heard?" said Madame Hooch. "Keep your broom steady, rise a few feet, and then come straight back down by leaning forward slightly. On my whistle, 3, 2, but Neville, nervously and jumpy and frightened to being left on the ground, pushed off hard before the whistle had touched Madame Hooch's lip. "Come back, boy!" she shouted, but Neville was rising straight up like a cork shot of a bottle. 12 feet, 20 feet. Harry saw his scared white face, looked down at the ground, falling away, saw him gasp, slip sideways up the broom, and wham! A third and nasty crack, and Neville lay face down on the grass in a heap. His broomstick was still rising higher and higher, and started to drift lazily toward the Forbidden Forest and out of sight. Madame Hooch was bending over Neville, her face as white as his. "Broken wrist," Harry heard her mutter. "Come on, boy. It's all right. Up you get." She turned to the rest of the class. "None of you is to move while I take the boy to a hospital. Wing, You leave those brooms where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come in, dear. Neville, his face tear-streaked, clutching his wrists, hobbles off with Madame Hooch, who had her arm around him. No sooner were they out of earshot than Malfoy burst into laughter. Did you see his face? The great lump! The other Slytherin joined in. Shut up, Malfoy, snapped Peabody Petal. Oh, sticking up for Longbottom, said Pansy Pinkerton, a hard-faced Slytherin girl. Never thought you'd like that, little crybabies, Peabody. Look, said Malfoy, daring forward and snatching something out of the grass. It's the stupid thing Longbottom's grand sent him. The remembrall glittered in the sun, and he held it up. Give it there, Malfoy, said Harry quietly. Everyone stopped talking to watch. Malfoy smiled nastily. I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find. How about up a tree? Give it here, Harry yelled. But Malfoy had lifted off onto his broomstick and taken off. He hadn't been lying. He could fly well, hovering level with the topmost branches on an oak he called. Come and get it, Potter. Harry grabbed his broom. No, shouted Hermione Granger. Madame Hooch told us not to move. He'll get us all in trouble. Harry ignored her. Blood was pounding in his ears. He mounted the broom and kicked her against the ground and up. Up he soared. Air rushed through his hair, and his robes whipped out behind him. And in a rush of fierce joy, he realized he'd found something he could do without being taught. This way, easy. This was wonderful. He pulled his broomstick up a little to take it even higher, and heard screams and gasps of girls back on the ground and an admiring whoop from Ron. He turned his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy in midair. Malfoy looked stunned. Give it to him, Harry called, or I'll knock you off that broom. Oh, yeah? Said Malfoy, trying to sneer, but looked worried. Harry knew, somehow, what to do. He leaned forward and grasped the broom tightly in both hands, and it shot toward Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy only just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp about-face and held the broom steady. A few people below were clapping. No cramming gold up here to save your neck, Malfoy, Harry called. The same thought seemed to have struck Malfoy. Catch it if you can, that, he shouted, and he threw the glass ball high into the air and streaked back toward the ground. Harry saw, as though in slow motion, the ball rise up in the air and then started to fall. He leaned toward and pointed the broom handle down. Next second, he was gathering speed in a step drive, racing the ball, and whistled in ears, minged with the screams of people watching. He stretched out his hand and foot from the ground. He had caught it just in time to pull his broom straight, and he tapped gently on the grass with Remembrall clutched safely in his fist. Harry Potter! His heart sank faster than he just dived. Professor McGonagall was running toward them. He got his feet trembling.